everyone, it's Quentin Bennett from Severe Comics, and today I'd like to take a break doing comic books today and just talk about how to reboot a comic book universe. Yes, of course this has a lot of issues for fans in general, you know, from what you get from DC Comics and Marvel, for example, like Heroes Reborn and New 52. But can it work? Yes and no. Which is true. Probably the best example of a successful reboot was from DC Comics when they did the Crisis on Infinite Earth. That was a good example right there. They did a very decent job of everything. Was there some plot holes there? Of course. There's always be plot holes. Always. But sometimes you're gonna have to do that. Sometimes you have to reboot a whole universe. But how can you do it? I believe that it's possible to reboot a universe if it's done correctly. The New 52 had a lot of potential. It really did. But one of the biggest problems was this whole idea of all these superpower beings just popped up out of nowhere within a few years, which doesn't make no sense, right? And for some reason, Batman been around for at least almost a decade, maybe 5 or 10 years or something like that, if I'm trying to remember correctly. And then like out of nowhere they sold All-Star Western, Jonah Hex, and it's just completely confusing right there. And I believe it was confusing to all of y'all too. And the whole Heroes Reborn, there's a pocket universe type of deal. And that's just a mess right there. Big mess. So I'm just going to give you just my idea of it. It's not... Everyone have their own idea how to reboot a universe. This is just mine in general. Alright. Where to start with DC to reboot it? Of course, you want the history of that universe, correct? So, I believe you should start with of course, like Jonah Hex and Justice Society of America. Those are the biggest ones you need to start with. You don't have to be all big, you know, big thing about it. You can probably like give a good 10 or 20 page issues of Jonah Hex. There's a whole good story arc. And the same thing with Justice Society of America for a little bit, and then you can just do a good old time skipping, and you can just start up Justice Society of America up today. These things can work. And then you start with Batman and Superman, Wonder Woman and Flash and all of them, and Shazam. All of that. It can work. It can really work. And the same idea would go with Marvel too. You just start with like someone like Captain America to have a good 20 issues or so during his time in World War II. And then you stop publication, and then you introduce Fantastic Four, which, to be honest, I probably would do like that, but like a weird way of going through the how Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and Steve Ditko and all of them did it back in the days. Start with Captain America, and then you went to Fantastic Four, then you go with X-Men, and you just keep going from there, and you like introduce the characters in those old series, like have Wolverine pop up in Captain America for a little bit, to maybe in the background sometimes. It can work. And I mean, I believe it can work if it's done correctly, which I do. Which in my comics, I do believe you should have a good beginning, middle, and end of everything. Because eventually the story's just going to get dry, and you're just going to lose ideas because you can't do anything with other characters, because you will end up like something bad, like One More Day, which everyone can agree was a very bad idea, because you want to reboot Spider-Man, but at the same time you don't want to reboot Spider-Man. And that's the problem with these corporations. They want to reboot, but at the same time they don't want to reboot. And that's a conundrum right there. That's a fancy word. I don't think you know what that means. I don't. But I do believe it can work if it's all done correctly. And I do think it can. Can it be successful? Yes and no. But I don't believe you should go to issue number 1 every time that series fails. You own it. And you just keep going. Because the readers want to see the highs and lows. Well, they want to see mostly the highs, though. It's understandable. After all, even Batman have a low ratings for a good while. It happens. But did the DC of back then, Marvel from back then, went to say, oh, back to number 1? No, they didn't. They just continue and they just keep on moving forward. And that's what I respect about that. I just don't like that whole idea of going back to number 1 just because you think the readers can't keep up. They can. They just don't want a boring story. And of course they will skip that one particular story. For a good example, the Clone Saga. They will skip that because it's not relevant. Because that was wasted potential right there. Which is the same. Which of course, a lot of characters have become wasted potential. Because they don't want to give them new villains and everything. But that's something for another time, I suppose. But with all the reboots, if you do it correctly, yes, it can work. Just start with the Justice Society and Johnny Hicks, and just go with Wonder Woman and Batman, Superman, and Flash, and then you just work your way up right there. And probably one of the reboots I did kind of understand was Shazam, but I didn't really like what they doing with him now. They've completely depowered him. No, he's not as equal to Superman as he's supposed to be. And they botched on the villains. Besides from Savannah and Black Adam, all the other villains were completely went like that. Which Shazam, or aka Captain Marvel, is probably one of the best villains out there. After all, Shazam was the one Captain Marvel was the one that started the whole Rogues Gallery. Respect that. And the whole villain team up ordeal. And it's not just the same, but like Blue Beetle, Captain Atom, and all of them had great potential, and you should focus on those potentials. Because you can't fully depend on the big three. You can never depend on the big three. Never. After all, the one thing I learned is if you depend on a few things way too much, eventually it will dry out and you will suffer. Which I think is what's happening right now. Of course they try to boot them up, but they either pick a wrong writer that don't understand the character, or so on and so on. It's just one thing after another. It's always like that. The big problem with Shazam is I think they depend on too much on the writer at the time. What was his name? Oh crap, I can't remember his name. And my internet's not working, so I can't look it up either. But you know what I'm saying. You can't depend on the big three, or the big five, or six. Actually, you gotta move things around. After all, a soil is only as good if you keep adding new material to it every so often. A cornfield can only last for so long before the nutrients of the soil is dried out. That's what I meant to say. And right now in the example, you're kind of drying everything out by depending on the same ordeal over and over. But that's all I got to say. You can give me an example of what you think. Please subscribe to www.severecomics.com. You can read all my comics for $6 a year. And I will see you then. Please like and subscribe. Bye.